I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And I'm JT Timmons.
And today we're going to do a mini episode, and we're going to be talking about dueling in Savannah. So that's going to be a pretty fun conversation, you know.
There's a lot of duels, right? Like a lot of...
Enough. There are enough duels.
Enough duels.
Enough duels to have a dueling ground.
Yes.
To have an area that was dedicated for, it feels like almost 100 years.
Yeah, it was
1770s to the
1853, I want to say, is when they stopped doing duels.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah. But before we get into that, JT, you have a few announcements for us?
Yes, I do. First off, I'd like to thank our newest Parajunkies for this week. And I'd like to thank Mel Ellis, Cameron, Emily Barnett, and Ellen Etheridge. Thank y'all so much for becoming Parajunkies. We're really excited to have you, and we got a lot of good stuff coming for you. Another announcement is on December 17th. We are ending season 2. Our seasons are going to become kind of shorter. Season 1 was this big 50-episode season, but I think now we're going to start, getting into the normal podcaster seasons of 20 a season. So we are going to be ending season 2 December 17th. We're actually going to take a short 2-week break, so we can enjoy the holidays with our families and all of that. Parajunkies, you will still be getting episodes. Don't worry. You're still going to be getting the exclusive episodes every single week throughout that break. And then we are back on the 1st.
Yep.
Correct? Yep. We are
back. In the new year.
Yep. In the new year, we're back on the 1st. And that is, we are going to have a really, really cool special episode on the 1st. And it's going to be awesome. So that is, we're going to take some of that time also to, restructure. We're going to have some new announcements, either towards the end of this season and the beginning of the next season, season 3, starting the first day of 2023.
Yes.
Cool.
So make sure to follow along with us. Make sure to follow us on social media, on TikTok under Haunted City Podcast, and on Instagram under The Most Haunted City on Earth, so that way you can keep up to date with what we're going about. And then also, we do want to start doing videos of telling stories that happen to our listeners. So if you have a good ghost story, please email it to us. JT, what's our new email that we've got?
It is called ghostmail@hauntedcitypodcast.com.
Yes, we're going to call it Ghost Mail, if you will.
Ghost Mail episodes.
So definitely send us over those stories that you have so that maybe we will read them on the podcast. And then also, a few of you have reached out and said that you wanted to send things to us. If you do, for some reason, want to send us something, we do have a P.O. box. So you can find that on our website. It is also in our link tree in the bio of both our Instagram and TikTok. So you need that, that's where you can find it.
Also, if you have cursed and haunted items, don't send it through the mail.
Please, God, don't do that.
Send it through the mail. We'll take them.
Okay, put attention JT.
Yes. Yeah. Yes, just to JT. But anyway, so let's go ahead and dive into dueling. So dueling actually started in Ireland, which is really no surprise. But it's a bit different. The European style, it was called European Duello, Duello, the Code of Duello. And so when it first began in Europe, basically the concept is if you had beef with somebody, one person had to die so that the settlement could be made. It's very gruesome compared to the Southern style of dueling, considering that somebody had to shed blood in some way. Also, doctors had to be present for those particular types of duels. But when it was adapted down here in the South, basically, a lot of people would do a sort of agreement that they would do the count your paces and then turn around, look each other in the face, and shoot up into the air. And after that, there would be...
For you Hamilton fans out there.
Yes, exactly. Very much so Hamilton. And then it would be agreed upon with a firm handshake of who won the duel.
Shoot up in the air?
Yes.
So there was no death?
No,
So
not necessarily.
It was
shoot faster?
peculiar about it
Yeah.
was you're showing up for your honor.
Mm-hmm.
Participating in the duel was restoring your honor.
Okay.
And they believe that it shouldn't cost your life. So you could still fully shoot a person. That was, but if you were an honorable person, if you valued life, if you're a good Christian, you weren't going to just gun someone down. So shooting up into the air was a sign of respect of the situation and the gravity of it, but also saying, okay, we got this far. We got to the dueling grounds. We're definitely facing off. And again, spoilers for Hamilton fans.
Right.
Famously, Alexander Hamilton shot in the air, thinking that this duel was not going to, but Aaron Burr shot him dead.
Oh, wow.
So, that puts you in this place where you realize that it was an honor system that not everybody, participated in.
Exactly.
But
yes,
this is a podcast about ghosts.
Well, we haven't gotten there, Jay.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I mean, I know everyone else is thinking it too. Wait, so they're talking about like duels where they just shoot up in the air?
We are a ghost podcast. They know the ghost is coming.
Okay.
Yeah, you gotta as the comments on YouTube said, let her tell the story, JT. Anyways, I
didn't take my medicine today.
It's okay. But yeah, so basically though, like Chris said, sometimes that didn't happen. And also, in Southern dueling, a doctor did not have to be present for the duels unless it was agreed upon by both parties that one was going to be needed. Mm-hmm. And so basically, and also a lot of doctors didn't want to be a part of duels because then they would have liability for not saving someone's life or things like that. Also, they watched someone kill someone else, so that would mean that they are a witness.
Yeah, accomplice.
Yes, exactly.
If they don't say anything.
Exactly. And so a lot of times people would bleed out. They'd be left just to bleed out on the dueling grounds outside of Colonial Park Cemetery. So where the dueling grounds was if you go to the southwest corner of Colonial Park Cemetery, outside the gate, that's where the dueling grounds were.
Right next to the playground.
Yes, it is.
Haunted playground.
Yes.
Where a little boy plays, right?
Intriguingly, when I first moved here for a good 15 years or so, those were basketball courts.
Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right there at the dueling grounds. You could play basketball.
There's a ghost boy, right?
There is, but he's not associated with dueling.
He's not associated with dueling, but there is access because you're standing in what most people agree was at one point a part of the cemetery itself. Mm-hmm. As they were shaping the city of Savannah, that whole parcel of land is no doubt on top of bodies.
Oh yeah. Well,
yeah. They said it went all the way to Liberty Street.
Yes. Yeah. It expanded, or extended, I should say, like about a block in every direction of the cemetery. And it contained roughly 10,000 bodies. So yeah, you're dueling on top of dead people more than likely in general. But the people who were killed at the dueling grounds, they would oftentimes be buried in Colonial Park Cemetery. And where that area is it's over by the center of the cemetery. If you're walking through that main sidewalk, you're going to go right by it at the center. But basically, when you died from a duel, you were given like a little stone marker, but it usually stated that you died by dueling and who killed you. Yep. So you have your murderer's name written on your headstone for all of eternity, which is very grim. But yeah, that was a common practice though. And it'll say, he died a coward or I'm not kidding.
Oh my God,
it's
so brutal.
Oh yeah, it was brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. They had no
I don't think
sympathy.
that's cowardly necessarily.
No, people will die depending on what the reasoning for the duel was.
That's just it. It was a part because dueling wasn't invented in Ireland. This particular brand that we branch off of, for the longest time, dueling was might makes right. The person who wins was right. Mm-hmm. So if the person who wins said you were a coward, and you show up and you fight and you die, then he was right. Then he was correct. Obviously,
Jeez.
God thought so too.
Oh my Lord!
Because that was the whole premise of dueling. Dueling was not a test of skill as much as it was a test of faithfulness and right, being right. Which is why plenty of terrible people grew into power because they were just stronger, faster, and better at fighting. And so other people kind of cowered away from it. And that whole concept of the duels, really did. If you dig into Savannah history, you'll find all kinds of interesting stories. One of my favorites was there was an actor who was traveling and was performing at the Savannah Theater nearby. And he was just going on a stroll in the morning, and there was this duel happening, and it was a buzz. And there were people literally kind of whisked him into the crowd to watch a duel. And I was like, that's got to be dangerous.
Right.
You don't want to be
No.
an observer of a duel. But in his story, the duelists were using rifles.
Like sniping each other?
Well, they were at the opposite end of field. They
Oh,
walked,
wow.
they did all the pistol things, and he had never seen a duel of any type, and he was like, and they shouldered their rifles, and I was like, a duel with rifles, that would really mess you up. Mm-hmm. Plus, if you were in the crowd behind somebody, that is not where you want to be watching a duel. But yeah,
Wow.
There's lots of stories. Probably the most famous duels, of course, was Button Gwinnett, who signed the Declaration of Independence. So he was Georgia's signatory on the Declaration of Independence, and he was gunned down by General McIntosh right there on the dueling grounds.
Oh, right outside of Colonial Park?
Right outside of Colonial Park. And they used to do reenactments
They did.
of the duels.
Did.
No.
I forgot
Yes.
about that.
Yeah. They would reenact Button Gwinnett's duel.
So brutal.
And it's so brutal. It is. It's just terrible. And General McIntosh, he stated that he wasn't going to do the shoot in the air duel. He had none of it. And his motto was 2 guns, 1 casket. When he came,
Gosh.
yeah, when he came, he was and he was a general. He was a pretty well known military person. And Button Gwinnett was a legislator, and I think he was the governor.
Why'd
at the
they
time.
hate each other again?
Who knows what
It's the classic, big men, running afoul of each other, and I think it was all about positioning for governorship of the state of Georgia. And words were said and things were done, and the next thing you know, Button Gwinnett, who by the way, his name was Button, which I still find just endlessly entertaining. I love that name, Button Gwinnett, Button. It's like that is just a great name.
It is.
Button Gwinnett.
Button versus Macintosh, Apple.
Yeah, versus General McIntosh.
Wow,
Yes.
they're just adorable names.
I know they're
are.
adorable names, but they ended in tragedy.
They did. Well, and they're not the only ones. Especially during the Revolution, that was when a lot of the duels would happen and things like that. But yeah, that is so brutal that they would recreate a man's death where he died. And that can only lead to, stirring of things. And
So, for those of you who think cemeteries are not haunted, ours is.
Because people
Yes.
Because people die there.
Well, and
We have like the only cemetery where people actually died there.
I hope. I'm sure that's not
Hopefully,
true,
yeah.
but yeah. Well, where it was like the city ordinance.
Yeah.
Because that was another thing. If you died or if you shot on the dueling grounds, the penalty, because it's against the law to murder a person no matter what. But because the dueling grounds were, and that there was a code of duelo, and I want to say there was, the updated version was the Southern duelo.
yes.
They called it the European duelo and the Southern duelo. But these were codes that were accepted, and if you died on the dueling ground or if you shot someone dead on the dueling ground, you were not penalized by murder. You were penalized for dueling. So, and oftentimes people who were like ticketed or who were cited for dueling would keep their citation as a proof of being, I was involved in a duel. Here's the ticket I got from the constable.
No.
Oh my gosh.
And what I find even more interesting was no one struck that from the law books.
Okay.
So conceivably, until the mid-'80s, somebody brought it up, and they were like, well, we can work that out of the language. But I think until the mid-'80s, you could shoot and kill a person on that stretch of land and still only walk away with a citation legally.
If you followed
granted,
the Southern Code of Duelo, I guess. But.
Granted, the DA would have a lot more to say about it, but I thought it was interesting that in the books, it was like, they had this area set aside, and if you shot and killed a person on this property as a part of this dual construct, you could conceivably argue that it was a Southern duelo.
Wow. Okay, so here's where I'm, I guess, confused. You started the episode out saying, it started in Ireland with death duels, but then in the South, they shot up in the air. But why are we killing people? Because we are in the South. Why are these duels deadly still?
Oh, well, they are still duels.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really led over from the European style of dueling was the concept of blood. Mm-hmm. First blood wins you. Mm-hmm. It did not necessarily have to be death. I want to say that there was a weird phrasing in the Code Duelo, which was like properly bloodied. If the opponent was properly bloodied, didn't mean dead. It just meant that the wounds inflicted showed. And that was enough to end the duel, to declare a winner. And I want to say, you can see this in certain movies. Rob Roy had a bit of that, where the main character, Rob Roy, played by Liam Neeson, was challenged to a duel.
Okay.
And it was to first blood. And so he just took out his sword and cut his own hand and said, there, you win. Because he just wanted to, he didn't want to fight. He didn't want to get into it. And I was like, that's a really cool moment.
Yeah, that is a cool moment.
That's manly. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
But I think that there was a lot of conflict about the difference between the honor of not shooting a person versus the desire for satisfaction of the insult.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're always hedging your bets.
Sure.
And I think that with pistols, because with swords, you had to be pretty aware of your skill level before you got involved in a duel with a sword. But guns were a great equalizer. People were able to, and it kind of even bled into what we consider the Wild West. Sure. When you think of gunslingers, really what they were just participating in very structured dueling. Meet at dawn.
Mm-hmm.
3 steps and draw. All of that stuff kind of is just a modification of dueling, and ultimately dueling was outlawed because so many people died.
Gotcha.
Because if you got shot in the leg back then, it could be a death sentence.
Absolutely.
Sure.
And again, because they didn't require in their code of dueling that you had to have a doctor present, those people were bleeding out a lot of times.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And so, it was, I feel like it's, really shows just like even back in these times, some men were more insecure than other men.
Yes.
And so, when you get the really insecure macho guy who is like, I'm not going to shoot my pistol in the air, that's when you get the more traditional style dueling. Whereas the other guys were just trying to put the issue to bed. Basically there were so many reasons why people would duel, like they showed it in Bridgerton, spoiler alert for, some of you who like Bridgerton, but there was a dueling moment where basically because the brother Anthony had caught his sister kissing a certain man in a certain season. I love Bridgerton, but I don't want to spoil it. Yes, so basically, Anthony was like, "No, I have to duel this man because that's the way it goes. Is like
my honor has been impugned.
Exactly, my honor, because you've taken the purity of my sister. I now have to duel you."
So the men who dueled back then is the equivalent now to the men that have lifted trucks.
Yes, actually.
That's a fair association. Although, I mean, dueling led to one of Savannah's most famous ghosts,
Oh.
which is the Moon River ghost.
Yep. That's
Oh, yeah, we talked about
You
that
know,
one.
because Stark did not show up to the duel,
Oh.
and Dr. Minus, that compounds the insult. Not showing up for your duel, the person who did show up is now, egg on his face, enraged. He hunted Stark down and shot him dead as an extension of the duel. He was like, I demand satisfaction, which is this big, macho thing. I demand satisfaction.
Exactly.
Now, wasn't there a famous dueling? I thought you told me about it, babe. It has to do with Fitzgerald.
The Fitzroy. That's not a duel necessarily, but it's a fight. So the Fitzroy, where it is, used to be it was a bar, but like it was kind of like a secret fight club, if you will. I'm not kidding.
Savannah's crazy.
So basically, it was an Irish bar. And so they would do like it was like boxing, basically.
Yeah, most people will say that it was a boxing match.
Yeah, so pretty much people just went to box and for sport of it. They weren't going there to
dueling.
mess people up. But this one guy, he comes in, he called himself like Brute Bailey or something like that, and he believed that he could take down any guy in the bar. And so he and everybody was kind of ignoring him. He was like the guy that everyone were like, okay, you're a little too drunk, bro, go home, But he finally, one guy basically says, yes, I will, I'll fight you, whatever. And he beats this guy into a bloody pulp. And so that was not how the boxing matches went. And so all of this guy who just was murdered in front of his friends grabbed Brute Bailey out of the ring, and they took him to the back closet, which is just a closet area now at Fitzroy, and they hanged him from the rafters. And that's basically how that went. So it wasn't a duel, but it was a very brutal fight.
Yeah.
And especially pretty much the fact that usually the hauntings that people experience are like the smell of blood, which is really...
At the Fitzroy?
Yes.
Or
Maybe your burger's
the
too
sound
rare.
of a bell.
Yes.
Oh.
An unexplained sound of a bell.
Oh,
I
man.
actually was interviewing someone
Maybe
about this story.
dinner's ready.
And the bell went off while we're talking in the middle.
ding.
It was just like, ding. And you're like, okay.
No way, really?
Yeah.
It was
crazy.
very insane.
Yeah. So, and then a few people have reported that they have seen like a shadowy figure hanging from the rafters, kind of swinging back and forth and whatnot, which is very creepy. But it's all residual energy, really.
That fits in this episode because it's a duel with Fizz.
It's a duel with this.
Yeah. It's a different type of duel. Yeah.
People oftentimes see a man in what would have been Revolutionary era attire, not a uniform, but just that late 1700s attire, standing in the dueling grounds. And most people are like, "Oh, that's probably Button Gwinnett," or that's but it could be anyone. But they definitely see him standing very upright, like he's waiting for a duel to begin. Mm-hmm. And so and even more fascinatingly is people will see it but not know that that's the dueling ground, not know anything about it, but they'll be like, I think I saw a man with a gun, or I saw a man just standing.
That's just Savannah.
That thing. And
Right.
So, yeah, fair enough.
Well, it's hard with Colonial Park Cemetery because we have a lot of soldier type spirits that linger in the cemetery, so it can be difficult to distinguish who was there for a duel, who was there as a soldier, because even Sherman's cavalry, they would camp out in the cemetery, and so there's a lot of residual or none are intelligent really, but it's residual hauntings of those soldiers that you're seeing, going about disrupting the cemetery, because that was what Sherman's cavalry really did. Oh, yeah. Is they would go around and knock headstones down, or they'd cross things out on people's headstones or change dates.
Jeez.
Yeah.
So it's
Not a lot of respect for the dead there.
No. And so it's very hard. It's very confusing when you're trying to decipher who are there for the duelings. But what I like to think are the ones that tend to linger over by where the dead duelers are buried. Those are the ones that are more than likely associated
So
with
you said
the
there's
duels.
a section?
Yes, yeah. It's in the center of the
How can our
cemetery.
listeners find it?
It's got a big sign next to it that says Dueler's Graves.
Yeah, it says Dueler's Graves.
Yeah. We've walked by it 10 million
I
times.
have never
Jay.
seen it.
Yeah.
Wait, where?
Yeah. It's literally
sort of center-ish.
Yeah, so if you're walking down the main sidewalk that cuts through the cemetery, it's going to be, if you're coming from the big gate that says Dar on it, it's going to be on your left, and it'll have a big historical marker sign that says Duelers' Graves, and it is next to a couple crypts.
Yeah.
So it's like right in the middle of a couple crypts.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, definitely go check it out. There's so much in that cemetery to just see.
Oh, yeah.
In
And
general,
it's
you could spend hours.
just fascinating.
Yeah.
Because it's very old, but well kept.
Yes, definitely. The city has done a good job preserving things. And you can tell that some of the headstones have been cleaned and like, some of them you can still read. A lot of them, because they're so old, it's just like you can sometimes take your finger and make out some words, but it's like,
said,
yeah, exactly. But definitely nonetheless, a lot of blood was shed in the cemetery from the duels, and also just duels are a very interesting concept in general.
Oh, sure.
So
Yeah. Because it's organized murder.
Yes. And but it did get outlawed first by South Carolina, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
They outlawed it first.
This is
And
interesting because I think the guy who wrote the Southern Duelo
He did.
was from South Carolina.
Yes,
He's
yeah.
a South Carolinian.
yeah. So the South is full of little bits and bobs of history like that are contradictory, but that's okay. But definitely a big part of Savannah's history that doesn't get talked about a lot, I find. It gets overshadowed by all the other wild things that have happened.
True.
So
People don't talk about it very much. Although we did used to reenact it, which will go down in the books as weird.
very bizarre.
It's a bizarre practice.
That is a weird flex. So, but I hope you guys enjoyed this little mini episode. And if you have any other like small topics that you think you would find interesting to listen to hear us talk about on these mini episodes, definitely send us over your recommendations. We'd love to hear it. So with that, thank you guys again. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.